What Satan is really busy doing is he is setting up the world for a complete collusion and destruction. He is setting up the image of the beast. When we look at the first hand that Yeshua had shown us, he's shown us the signs of the Rosicrucian cross, of Satan, and of the snake swallowing his own tail. These are all the secret organizations and secret societies that all work for one purpose towards one goal. In the other hand, we see the bow. We see the power of the United Nations and the United States of America controlling them, riding on the white horse, given a bow to conquer all the nations. And he's working with them in order to achieve his goal. We see that it also has a head of a pig, which is an unclean animal, and which is also a sign of the desecration of the temple, which the Antichrist will do in order to fulfill the prophecy. We see the head of the Roman Empire. It is still the old Roman Empire. It is just in a changed form. We see also that it has two legs, and it has stood up on its two legs, and its wings were torn off. The lion whose wings were torn off. The two wings being the United States of America. And we will show in a brief while, as we have seen already, that when the abomination of desolation is set up, then the scapegoat will be blamed. The United States will be blamed. And the wings will be torn off. We see also that it has two legs, just like Nebuchadnezzar's statue. So it is the same as Nebuchadnezzar's statue that is set up, just like Nebuchadnezzar set up a statue that must be worshipped, and all who would not worship it or bow down to it, they would be killed. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was thrown in a fiery furnace. So this statue also is a statue or an image of the beast, which is being set up right now in the world through the Jesuits, the Roman Catholic Church sitting behind them, which Satan is orchestrating. But Yahweh reveals something else. It reveals that it stands on the nuclear nations of the world. It will be standing on the nuclear nations of the world. We know that the nuclear nations of the world consist out of the permanent members and the non-permanent members. The non-permanent members wanting to be part of the permanent members. But the permanent members basically being the nuclear nations of the world. We also see that the world is divided into the East and the West, just like the Roman Empire was divided into the eastern and the western parts. And we will now see how three will have to be removed. As we have seen, three would have to be removed and are currently being removed in 2011 from February, as Egypt and Libya are being removed, with Syria remaining, so that the Antichrist could take his position as headship to rule the world. We also know that the statue of Nebuchadnezzar had 10 toes. And these 10 toes, Yeshua had revealed to John, saying that these are 10 kings that would come. And they would worship, or they would exert their authority with the beast for 1 hour. The question is, what is the image of the beast? It is all the world trading organizations that are set up to achieve their goals, but behind them are rules. That if these rules are not played according to the way that they want them to be played, they are like breaking a contract, and they will call all to be put to death who will break the contract of the rules of the World Trading Organizations. There are many different World Trading Organizations, but we'll look at the most powerful ones and how they will start to rule the world, and the Antichrist will take his position from there. We see the United Nations, United Nations, the African Union, and the proposed Mediterranean Union, and well as the forces of Europe under NATO. They're all starting to work towards a one world, working together under their banner. In order to understand how world trading organizations will lead to the setting up of the image of the beast, we will now look at some world trading organizations, and the most important organization is the United Nations. The United Nations organization, or simply the United Nations, is an international organization whose stated aim are facilitating and cooperating in international law, international security, economic development, social progress, and human rights, and the achieving of world peace. The UN was founded in 1945 after World War II to replace the League of Nations, to stop wars between countries, and to provide a platform for dialogue. It contains multiple subsidiary organizations to carry out its missions. We see that the United Nations, one of their chief purposes is to bring international security. So if there is any so-called terror or violence happening between countries, which they term as a disturbance of peace, they would use their power to actually try and bring peace in those areas again. Another very important thing is that the United Nations was founded in 1948, just 3 years before Israel became a state. We can see that Yeshua had said to us that the last part that will happen is that a beast will be prepared. We see how from 1945 the United Nations has been preparing for the last days. We see in front of us pictures of the United Nations Security Council General, which is Ban Ki-moon. We also see President Obama at a Security Council meeting. We see the French President, Nicolas Sarkozy. We also see some of the soldiers, normally having a blue beret, standing for the UN Peace Corps as we know them. We also see the President of South America, YHWH, and we see some UN soldiers on the battlefield, ready and able to go and fight the enemy or to bring the peace that they facilitate. The last thing that's also very important, it says this organization also contains multiple subsidiary organizations to carry out its missions. So although the United Nations has this core purpose, it also consists out of arms that have other purposes or other organizations which also work together with the United Nations. There are currently 192 member states, including nearly every sovereign state in the world. From its offices around the world, the UN and its specialized agencies decide on substantive and administrative issues in regular meetings held throughout the year. The organization is divided into administrative body, primarily the General Assembly, which is the main deliberative assembly, then the Security Council for deciding certain resolutions for peace and security, the Economic and Social Council for assisting in promoting international economic and social cooperation and development, then the Secretariat for providing studies, information and facilities needed by the UN, the International Court of Justice, which is the primary judicial organ, and the additional bodies that deal with the governance of all other UN system agencies, such as the World Health Organization, the World Food Programme, the United Nations Children's Fund. The UN's most visible public figure is the Secretary General, currently Ban Ki-moon of South Korea, who attained the position in 2007. The organization is financed from assessed and voluntary contributions from within its member states and has 6 official languages: Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. We see here that the United Nations basically have already incorporated all the nations in the world. That is where their name also came from, with their purpose to unite all the nations under one banner. But we see that they consist out of main organizations being the General Assembly, the United Nations Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, and then also the Secretariat, and then, very important, the International Court of Justice. In order to understand how the final persecution will come about, we need to see how these organizations, actually how United Nations include the International Court of Justice. Then it also have other organizations which are secondary organizations like the World Health Organization, Food, Children's Fund, which seems good in one way, but in another way we can see how broad it is and how great its extent is in extending its influence across the face of the earth. The United Nations is based on 5 principal organs, formerly actually 6. The Trusteeship Council suspended operations in 1994. The General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Secretariat, and the International Court of Justice. 4 of the 5 principal organs are located at the main United Nations headquarters, located on international territory in New York City. The National Court of Justice is located in Hague, while other major agencies are based in the UN offices at Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi. Other UN institutions are located throughout the world. We want to now look at these 4 or 5 principal organizations and how they actually are put together and what their main purposes are in order to understand how prophecy will be fulfilled and how the image of the beast has been set up already and are preparing for its final clash, so that it will try to destroy those who worship Yeshua and would not bow down to the image of the beast and to what he has told them to do. The UN General Assembly. The General Assembly is the main deliberative assembly of the United Nations, as we have already seen, composed of all United Nations member states. The Assembly meets in regular yearly sessions under a president elected from among the member states. Over a 2-week period, at the start of each session, all members have the opportunity to address the Assembly. Traditionally, the Secretary General makes the first statement, followed by the President of the Assembly. The first session was convened on the 10th of January 1946 in the Westminster Central Hall in London and included representatives of 51 nations. When the General Assembly votes on important questions, a two-thirds majority of those present and voting is required. Examples of important questions include recommendations of peace and security, election of members of two organs, admission, suspension, and expulsion of members, and budgetary matters. All other questions are decided by a majority vote. Each member country has one vote. Apart from approval of budgetary matters, resolutions are not binding on the members. The Assembly may make recommendations on any matters within the scope of the UN, except matters of peace and security that are under Security Council consideration. Conceivably, the one-state, one-vote power structure could enable states comprising of just 8% of the world's population to pass a resolution by two-thirds vote. What is very important in what happens in the UN General Assembly is to see that most general administrative as well as other questions are included in this meeting. But there are specific questions which cannot be handled in this meeting, and decisions cannot be made in this specific meeting. Although a two-thirds majority of those present voting is required in order to pass any specific problem or to make any recommendations, the specific recommendations of peace and security regarding the security of nations, which could affect wars in the world, they are not handled in this meeting, but they are handled in the Security Council meeting, which we will look at next. The UN Security Council is charged with maintaining peace and security among countries, while other organs of the United Nations can only make recommendations to member governments. The Security Council has the power to make binding decisions that member governments have agreed to carry out under the terms of Charter Article 25. The decisions of the Council are known as United Nations Security Council resolutions. The Security Council is made up of 15 member states, consisting of 5 permanent members, which is China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and 10 non-permanent members, currently Austria, Burkina Faso, Costa Rica, Croatia, Japan, Libya, Mexico, Turkey, Uganda, and Vietnam. The 5 permanent members hold veto power over substantive but not procedural resolutions, allowing a permanent member to block an adoption but not to block the debate of a resolution unacceptable to it. The 10 temporary seats are held for 2-year terms, with member states voted in by the General Assembly on a regional basis. The presidency of the Security Council is rotated alphabetically each month and is held by Burkina Faso for the month of December 2009. What we see here is 2 very important points in the UN Security Council. We see that they can, all other councils or all other departments of the security of the UN General Assembly can only make recommendations. But matters concerning peace and security of countries goes over to the Security Council. Now, the Security Council consists out of 15 members, and this will become very important when we again look at the image of the beast. We see that basically it consists out of 5 permanent members, which we have already seen is the nuclear nations of the world. They have the nuclear powers, and they are, as we have seen, China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. But then there are also 10 non-permanent members who are also added to this council, which are rotated and are chosen in a very specific way. And we see the current nations that are part of the non-permanent members. The other thing we have already seen is that the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council have a veto power to block the acceptance of a resolution. Although they can block this, they cannot block the debate or a discussion about a matter, thus preventing them from speaking about matters that will concern that specific area of security or peace. What is also very important is to see that the 10 non-permanent members are elected by the General Assembly. So we'll see that the non-permanent members are put in place by the General Assembly, and therefore we must understand how important the interlinking is between the General Assembly and the UN Security Council, and how this will bring about the final fulfillment of prophecy and of the kingdom of the beast in the last days. Another part of the United Nations, and another organ, is the International Court of Justice, which is located in The Hague in the Netherlands, and is the primary judicial organ of the United States. It was established also in 1945 by the United Nations Charter, and the court began its work in 1946 as the successor of the Permanent Court of International Justice. The statute of the International Court of Justice, similar to that of its predecessor, is the main constitutional document consisting and regulating the court. It is based in the Peace Palace in The Hague in Netherlands, sharing the building with the Hague Academy of International Law, a private center for the study of international law. Several of the court's current judges are either alumni or former faculty members of the Academy. Its purpose is to adjudicate disputes among nations or states. The court has heard cases related to war crimes, illegal state interference, and ethnic cleansing, among others, and countries, and continues to hear cases. A related court is the International Criminal Court, began operating in 2002 through international discussion initiated by the General Assembly. It is the first permanent international court charged with trying those who commit the most serious crimes under the international law, including war crimes and genocide. The International Criminal Court is functionally independent of the UN in terms of personnel and financing, but some meetings of the ICC governing body, the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute, are held at the UN. There is a relationship agreement between the International Criminal Court and the United Nations that governs how the two institutions regard each other legally. Here is another very important part of the UN which must be understood. We see that the International Court of Justice already started in 1946, but it has been growing in power and now has come to a place where, because of the recommendations of the General Assembly, they have started to have an International Criminal Court where they try those who commit crimes against the international law, including war crimes and so-called genocides. So we see that those who are considered as terrorists, just as Bush once said, when the Twin Towers were attacked. He said that they now start their war on terror. What we really have is that we have a court of justice, which is an international court of justice, that now can try any organ, nation, country, or person who are considered as those who are committing serious crimes against international laws. Therefore, if any organ, whether religious or political, actually, according to the statute of the international law, breaks the what they consider as a peace agreement, they can be tried. They can even be put under. They could be taken to jail. They could be tried before a court of justice, and they could be found guilty and even be put to death for so-called crimes of genocide or disturbing peace. We'll see now how Yeshua had revealed to his servant and apostle John, saying that they will set up an image which they will give breath, and they will give him life, so that he will be able to put to death those who would not bow down to the beast or to his image. We see if they would not bow down or accept the rules and the agreements or the resolutions of the International Court of Justice, which was either voted in by the General Assembly, or even more intense matters of security by the UN Security Council, by the 15 members, 5 permanent and 10 non-permanent, they could be considered as terrorists. Thus, any Christian or any organization that would set itself up against the contract agreements or resolutions of the International Court of Justice could be tried in front of an international court, and they could be put to death, just as was prophesied. The last part that is hidden in this International Court of Justice, it says that the Court of Justice is functionally independent of the UN in terms of personal and financing. But some of the meetings governing the body, the assembly of state parties to the Rome Statute, are held at the UN. We see that there is a connection between Rome and the International Court of Justice hidden here. There's another hidden connection here that very few would actually see. It says the court will hear cases related to war crimes. It says that if there's any illegal state interference, or if there's anything called ethnic cleansing. We have seen many wars in Africa that has been considered as genocide. But no one has asked who has caused these wars. We have already seen, as Yeshua had revealed, that one of the arms of the image of the beast is actually the Rosicrucian cross, the Jesuits, who are the gatherers of information. What is the very purpose of the General Assembly? To gather information regards the states to see whether they are actually committing an illegal interference in the so-called international law, or against international law. Therefore, we can see how Rome and the political powers now have set up and are ready with their World Trading Organization, the United Nations, making all nations to bow down before them, and unless they accept their agreements, would be able to be tried and even put to death under international law. The last part of the United Nations, an organ called the Economic and Social Council, assists the General Assembly in promoting international and economic or social cooperation and development. The ECOSOC, which is the Economic and Social Council, has 54 members, all of which are elected by the General Assembly for a 3-year term. the president is elected for a one-year term and chosen amongst the small or middle powers represented on the ECOSOC. The Economic and Social Council meets once a year in July for a 4-week session. Since 1998, it has held another meeting each April with finance ministers heading key committees of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. Viewed separate from specialized bodies, it coordinates functions include gathering, advising member nations, and making recommendations. In addition, the Economic and Social Council is well positioned to provide policy coherence and coordinate the overlapping functions of the UN subsidiary bodies, and it is in these roles that it is most active. What we see here is another part of the image of the beast. We saw that the heart of the organization situated in Europe is actually the World Monetary Fund. We see here that the Economic and Social Council, which is appointed by the General Assembly of 54 members, appoint these organs to be able to advise the UN, gathering information about nations and giving them recommendations of what decisions to make because of financial or economic or social reasons. We see here, it says it's well positioned to provide policy coherence and coordinate the overlapping functions of the UN subsidiary bodies. So we see that if you do not cohere or comply to the Economic and Social Council's monetary funds, you will also be breaking the resolutions of the UN Security Council, because you are a threat to the peace of the world and to the working together of all the nations in the world. So breaking one of their laws, you'll be breaking all of them. We also saw that Yeshua had shown us in another sign that he showed that this beast had in his one hand a dollar bill. We have seen how the dollar was used all the way through to control the world's economy. But when Saddam Hussein tried to now sell oil to the European Union through the newly developed euro, he was brought back into submission and even removed and finally tried before an international court of justice because of so-called genocide that he had committed. We can see how the scriptures told us that he will set up an image and he will give a mark to all the people. If they did not accept the mark, they would not be able to buy or sell. We see how the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, being one of the principal organs of the United Nations, will become a monster that will put to death all men who will not bow down to their monetary system. The last organ of the United Nations is the so-called specialized agencies of the United Nations, not necessarily dependent on the United Nations, but being a supporting arm of the United Nations. We just briefly want to give you an idea of the extent with which these things are interwoven, and these countries are, or companies and organizations are interwoven with one another. We have the Food and Agricultural Organization, situated in Rome, Italy, since 1945. Then we have the International Atomic and Energy Agency, which is situated in Vienna in Austria, which we have also seen has been the principal organization being used by the United Nations Security Council in order to bring all nations who have nuclear power plants into subjection in not manufacturing any plutonium-enriched material in order to manufacture a nuclear bomb. Then we have the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is situated in Montreal, Canada. Then we have the International Fund of Agricultural Development, also situated in Rome, Italy. Then the International Labour Organization, which is in Geneva, Switzerland. The International Marine Organization, which is situated in London, United Kingdom. Then we have the International Monetary Fund, which is situated in Washington, D.C. We have the International Telecommunication Union, which is also situated in Geneva, Switzerland. Very important also to see that the telecommunication is are able to be tracked, both the internet as well as telephones, cell phones, landlines can all be tracked and be traced, and they can even listen in to your discussions with other people. We see that France has specifically said that there will be no more privacy on the internet, but they will be able to use it for the security of the government. We also have the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organizations, which is situated in Paris, France, since 1946. We have the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, which is situated in Vienna, Austria. The International Postal Union, situated in Switzerland, in Britain. Then we have the World Bank, situated in Washington, D.C., since 1945. We have the World Food Programme, as we've already seen, situated in Rome, in Italy. We have the World Health Organization, headquarters situated in Geneva, Switzerland, since 1948. The World International Property Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. The World Meteorological Organization situated in Geneva, Switzerland. And finally, the World Tourism Organization situated in Madrid, Spain. When we look at all these organizations, we can see that it is a web of organizations having an influence in every area of our lives. Just look at something as simple as the post that you receive, the money with which you buy, the food which you need to eat, the weather and the situation given to you around what is going on in the world, tourism, the educational system, science, and our culturals. All these have already been included and are ready and prepared for all those who will not bow down to this beast and its prescribed conditions that those who want to worship it would have to fulfill and abide by. There are many other world trading organizations which were not mentioned here, which actually also are part and work together, and if they do not work together, will also be treated in the same way. The G8 nations, the G20 nations, the BRICS nations, all these nations are all part, and they are all world trading organizations, uniting nations under different resolutions and different purposes, but they all work together. And if they do not work together, they would not have been part of the United Nations. Therefore, all these nations, all their rulers, presidents, and kings, they have all submitted themselves to the rulership of the United Nations and its organ. We'll now see exactly what Yeshua has shown us through this sign in the heavens, and how this is the fulfillment of prophecy, and how this will bring about the final rulership of 10 nations or 10 areas of the world under one leader, the son of perdition, or the Antichrist.